Yeah.
But that's what they did. So
I would be
I'm gonna
interested to
put
investigate.
turn my phone off, or my volume anyway.
Okay, I'm seeing. Okay. Okay, looks good. Yes, on the Facebook Live, we see your face. Okay, that's perfect. Good. There you are. Okay, awesome. I'm just going to write something here in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know how many people will get on Facebook or Zoom or whatever, but we're recording it so people can keep learning from it later.
Great.
And yeah, let's see.
Because right now I can only see you and Victoria.
Yeah, you won't be able to see anyone who joins on Facebook because you're on Zoom.
Anybody else? Just you two?
You can see, if anyone joins on Zoom, you'll see them, but you won't see people joining on Facebook because we got people joining on 2 different platforms. So that's how it works, yeah. That's how we were able to do it on both. Otherwise.
That's cool.
Okay.
Just going to be real different.
Yeah. Let me just get it set up here. And it's Janet. You know Janet, right, Catherine?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
There she is.
She's my friend. I love her. So, welcome to... Let's see. Join here. I'm just writing a description here on Facebook. Here.
I should have written a bio for you. That's something that you ought to ask people to do.
Oh, yeah. Good. See, for the future, you're the guinea pig, so I'll do that in the future. Yeah. It's a good idea. I mean, you put a little one on the survey, but it's not very long.
No.
So we need a longer one.
Yeah. I used to be a bank auditor.
Oh, wow. We can go way back.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, I'm writing wrong. Okay.
So I'm not going to hear people when I ask questions then either. Is that true?
I think. Let me see. I can change the settings.
Usually I ask a question and then I get feedback. I guess they can do it in the chat.
Yeah, let me see. I think what I might have done is I might have turned the microphones off for the other participants just because I didn't want like a lot of noise during your talk. I could probably change that somewhere though because I didn't realize like, yeah, nobody else can say anything except for you and me. And, oh, you can talk? Yeah, Victoria can talk. Are you? How come you? I thought I did that. Maybe I didn't do that. Okay. Oh, okay. Victoria, our tech expert.
Because on my thing, I see Janet's name, but I see a microphone with a slash.
Yeah.
But not her picture.
She has her mic and her video off, right?
Okay.
It's the best way. Victoria, you can do the timing if you want, and I'll like think of questions because you asked that in the chat. If I can find a pen.
Somewhere in there, and because usually what I'll answer questions as I go, but everything is always gauged on how many questions, what kind of feedback do I get, you know? So, and I've never done it online before.
I'll set it for 45 minutes, and I'll let you know as we get closer to 30.
Perfect.
It's very dark here. Trying to get lighter. Okay, let me see here.
Just let me know when we're ready to start.
Yeah, I think, see, you can start whenever, and we just let people in. I'll be looking at the Zoom, and you can just start with your introduction so it doesn't go late. I do want to record it, though. Okay. Let me see if there's any way. Victoria, do you know if you could record it somehow? Because like you recorded the other Zoom meeting. It's okay if not.
I could try, but I'd have to
Okay. Okay. I can probably do it on my phone. It's okay. I think I could just do it on my phone, so we're fine. Don't worry about it. Okay.
Well,
Hmm?
we'll have the Facebook Live recording too.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Then.
We don't have the Zoom one exactly. We'll have the Facebook one.
Mhm.
We'll have at least one thing, if not the other.
Okay. So it's recording right now, the Facebook one.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna do.
Mhm.
Okay, well, thank you, perfect. After say both of them doesn't really help.
Okay. You can. Yes. Sorry, Victoria. Are you still talking?
Yes, kind of. But feel free to ask questions if I need to.
Yes. That sounds good. I don't know why it's so dark right here. I'll turn on the light. But we have our first speaker tonight our first speaker for the year is Katherine Mulholland, who is going to talk to us about abortion recovery and abortion healing, I believe. And she is a registered nurse, and she talks to nursing students often about this subject, from what I've heard. And so thank you for coming, Miss Katherine Mulholland. And we look forward to hearing what you got to say to us.
Great, great. Well, good evening, everybody. My name is Katherine Mulholland. Welcome to everybody. This is the first time that I have ever done this online. So,
Hillary.
Please bear with me as we go through the evening. I live near San Antonio, Texas. I've been a nurse about 12 years. This is a second career.
Can you turn on the light, please? The door light?
Okay, so if you have a question, put it in the chat, and then we will try to get to it in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
So,
okay.
We're going to talk about pregnancy tonight and abortion. So, what I want to the notes that I have will be available to you. You just have to send, I guess, an email or a request to your moderators, and they will be happy to share all of my sources with you. Okay, so I want to talk about pregnancy initially. So, what happens in the first 8 weeks of pregnancy? And I'm assuming that most of the people that are here tonight are either nursing students or they are registered nurses. So I may be using a little bit of jargon tonight. So what happens in the first 8 weeks of pregnancy? All right. Well, one of the first things that occurs is the brain and the spine begin to form. The heart starts going. And in the first, I'm a very visual learner. So I have here these are actual models, okay? So this, let me come right up close. That's the size of of 9 weeks. So, I think it's easy to talk about things, but unless you actually see what we're talking about, I don't think you get it as much. So 7 weeks, 7 to 9 weeks, right here. All right. What happens in 9 to 12 weeks as nursing students who've gone through OB? Heart rate. You can definitely hear the heart rate. It's at about 140 to 150 beats per minute. Well, let's look at what 10 week looks like. Here we are, 10 weeks. And you can actually see, this is a really good representation. You can see the little arms, you can see the head, the little feet are starting to develop. Pretty cool. The liver is working, the kidneys begin to make urine during this time. All right, 13 to 16 weeks. All right, 16 weeks. The bones are hardening, the toenails are forming, which I think is really cool. So this is 16 weeks. So look at the difference. size of I'm about a size 7.5 hand, right, for gloves. So here we are. This is when a lot of abortions take place. And here's our baby. All right, 21 to 24 weeks. Oh, if any of you all have been pregnant before, you know about babies kicking. So here we are. This is 22 weeks. 22 weeks. Size of my hand. Bigger than my hand. You can definitely see fingers. You can definitely see toes. Looks like a baby. All right. Something kind of interesting, in 29 to 32 weeks, the testicles in the boys have actually started to descend. And for the uterus and the vagina in the females, that starts 17 to 20 weeks. Okay. I have two primary sources that I will be using tonight as far as my sources. The one, we're going to talk from the information by the Guttmacher Institute. They are your pro-choice source of information. The other side that we will be talking about a little later is the Elliott Institute, and they are your pro-life. So the number of abortions, and all of this information is from the Guttmacher website that we're about to talk about. The abortions in the United States and this is the most recent information that they have on their website, which is 2017, 862,320 abortions were performed in 2017. So let's break down that number a little bit and see who are we talking about? What are our demographics? Well, first of all, the thing that I find so very interesting is that approximately 1 in 4 women, by the time that they are age 45, have had an abortion. 1 in 4. So the next time you're sitting in your classroom, or the next time you're in the grocery store, or the next time you're standing in line somewhere, and you see women 15 to 45 or so, count 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that is how common abortion is in the United States. So breaking it down by race, white patients account for about 39% of all abortions, Black patients 28%, Hispanic 25%. Now, not all of my percentages are going to add up to 100 because there are a few that I'm going to just skip because they're inconsequential and they're so small in number. A lot of people believe, oh, well, if you're a Christian and if you're a Catholic or you're an evangelical, they don't have abortions. Well, let's talk about that because the numbers will probably surprise you. According to Guttmacher, 30% of all women who have had abortions are Protestant. 30%. 24% are Catholic, and 38% have no religious affiliation whatsoever. Those particular statistics really did surprise me. That there were so many, 54% claim to be Christian, over half. That's a lot. Okay. 72% of clinics offer abortions up to 12 weeks. 25% of abortion clinics. So we're basically talking about our Planned Parenthood. Are 20 weeks, and 10% of them are up to 24 weeks. Now, this information is not 2020. It's not even 2019. I do know, I believe it's the state of Virginia has just changed where you can have abortions up until the day before birth. That information is not on the Guttmacher Institute's website yet. Now, there's two different, oh, and I forgot to mention, I am an operating room nurse. So I have, although I chose not to participate in elective abortions, I did participate in with what we call spontaneous abortions, like after the fact, you know, and we have to go in and make sure that there are no, what they call products of conception left inside the uterus. As nurses, one of the things we are not required to actively participate. However, having said that, you need to make sure, you need to check with your facility that you are intending, students in particular, to work at, that you will not be required if that is something that you object to. There are two kinds of abortions. There are surgical abortions, and then there are ones that are produced with a PO-med, right? The PO-med ones have gone up in popularity significantly in the past few years. Medication abortions account for 39% of abortions in 2017, up from 29% in 2014. So why this big influx of that choice? My thinking is that the women believe that it is less invasive and it'll be easier and you can do it at home, which is all true, but we'll talk about this a little more as we get into the talk. There are two different drugs that you take. The first one is called Mifeprex, and that is for those of us that are a little bit older. You might remember the term RU486. Same drug. You take that drug. Oftentimes, it will be, and some of this will depend upon your state and what your state laws are. You take that in the Planned Parenthood itself, and then within 24 to 48 hours, then you take Cytotec, and that will help. It's called cervical ripening, and that will just allow the cervix to open so that the uterus can empty. And that usually occurs, so you take the first pill, 24, 48 hours later, you take the second pill, and after you take that second pill, within 6 to 10 hours is when the actual abortion will occur. So how much does this cost? You know, because that's what everybody, needs to know. How much will this cost me? According to Guttmacher, for a non-hospital 10-week gestation is $508. $508. For the medical abortion side, up to 9 weeks is $535. There again, this is a little older information, but it gives you a good starting point. Each state has their own laws about how the PO-med can be given. In my state of Texas, we have a lot of restrictions, or I shouldn't call them restrictions. We have a lot of concerns for women. We believe in Texas, our lawmakers believe, that in order for this med to be given, it must be given by a physician, not a nurse practitioner, not a PA, an actual physician. We also have a law that physician needs to be with the patient, so it cannot be telemed. Okay, every state is different. All right, I have been invited by the University of New Mexico's pro-life group. So we're going to talk a little bit about New Mexico, because I think that's where a lot of our people are going to be joining us tonight. So in 2017, there were 4,620 abortions in your state, and New Mexico accounted for 0.5% of all abortions in the United States for 2017. While that doesn't sound like a very large number, one of the most interesting things about New Mexico is it is one of the states that has very, very, very few restrictions on abortion. For instance, it does not require a waiting period. It does not require parental involvement. So any minor can just walk in and get an abortion, and her parents have absolutely, or guardian has absolutely no clue. And they're publicly funded abortions in the state of New Mexico. So, in my opinion, there as an operating room nurse, there are some concerns there, especially for our teens, and we'll be getting into that shortly. Let's contrast that with the state of Texas, where I am. So we had in 2017, so you guys had 4,600, I think it was, 4,620. In my state, and granted my state is a lot bigger than your state, 55,440 abortions, which accounted for 6.4% of all abortions in the United States in 2017. Huge number, huge number. And we have some restrictions. You must receive counseling in the state of Texas. You must have a 24-hour waiting period. They prohibit the telemedicine for the PO med for abortion. You must have an ultrasound, and that ultrasound must be explained to you. They can't just do it and hide the screen from you and off you walk. Okay? They have to explain, this is the head, this is how big, that's what they're supposed to do. Now, the abortion advocates state that the abortion clinics, the state requires abortion clinics to meet unnecessary and burdensome standards related to their physical plant, equipment, and staffing. Let's think about that for just a minute. What is the number one job of a nurse, registered nurse, LVN, is to be an advocate for that patient. If we are going to advocate for our patients, don't we want proper staffing? Don't we want to make sure that everything is sterile? Don't we want to make sure that the building has adequate light, adequate electricity, adequate? I don't buy that. Okay, moving on. Different states require different insurances to cover abortion and not cover abortion. I also want now to talk about abortion rates by ethnicity. We touched on this a little bit before. It has gone down. The number of abortions has gone down, which I think is a great thing. for Black and Hispanics, according to Guttmacher in 2014, 27% were Black, 18% were Hispanic, and 16% were other non-Hispanic, and 10% white non-Hispanic. So one of the arguments that pro-choice people will say is abortions must be available especially under 3 certain conditions. One is rape, incest, threat to the life of the mother. So let's talk about those 3. According to the Johnson Archives, they compiled some statistics, and they said that with their research that abortions because of rape is 0.3%. 0.3%. For incest, 0.03%. And for the physical health of the mother and the physical life of the mother, those 2 combined, was 0.9%. So, a lot of people say, I don't believe that. It's no way that it is that small of a number. I said, okay. So let's say these numbers are off by 3%. So let's add 3% to this. When you do the math, it comes up to 10.23%. Basically, round number, 10%. 10% of all abortions, rape, incest, threat to the life of the mother. So, what's the other 90%? Usually, it's a convenience thing. Usually. I'm not going to move on to the pro-life side. This is the Elliott Institute where I'm getting this information. So let's talk about the physical complications related to abortion. I've seen some studies that will say 1.3% all the way up to 30.5% of the cases have complications. So it's like, Katherine, what do you mean? What do you mean? You're going from 1% to 30%? What's going on here? Explain this to me. Well, a lot of it depends on what time frame you are going to look at. If you're only going to look at, say, the first 48 hours after an abortion, or are we going to look at longer term issues that have long-term effects such as infertility? Excuse me. So that's the reason for the huge disparity in the percentage numbers. Can you shut the door? Thank you. So rare but serious complications would be blood clots and embolisms. Why? Well, in an abortion, there's a lot of bleeding that is involved. The most common complications are infection, lacerations, perforations, retained tissue, unsterile instruments, or a pre-existing condition. Let's say, she had chlamydia or she had some other kind of STI. That raises your chances for complications. Longer term complications. What could some longer term complications be? Well, you can have cervical incompetence. What does that mean? That means during the abortion itself, whatever that provider did injured your cervix. So the next time you go to try to get pregnant on purpose, perhaps you could miscarry more because there was something that occurred with the cervix. Infertility can be another one. This can be related to pelvic inflammatory disease. This could have been an undiagnosed STI, like we had just talked about, ectopic pregnancy, pregnancy outside of the uterus. There's a lot of things that can happen. So what else? What else can happen with abortion? How do you cope? Well, oftentimes we find that there's substance abuse. You know, whether that is drinking, which a lot of times it is. It could be alcohol. It could be drugs. Oftentimes there's suicidal ideologies. Now, we've talked about the physical side of the abortions. Let's talk about the psychological issues. What can happen here? Well, I'm assuming that you all have had your psych semester. So we're talking about repressing, suppressing, denial, minimalizing, blaming, avoidance of the event. And oftentimes in life, there are, for any of you that have had PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, if you have ever, or if you know of anyone, a lot of the big thing is triggers. So what could be a trigger for someone, your patient on your floor? What could be a trigger? Have you ever been in the hospital before and there's a baby that's born, and then all of a sudden overhead you hear the lullaby, right? You guys heard that?
Mhm.
Yeah, that could be a big time trigger. Maybe maybe the woman is on the floor having a GYN problem, and she sees all these OBs, or she sees the mothers with the babies walking around. That could be a trigger. A baby shower. You know, these women who have experienced these abortions, you know, what we were saying, between 15 and 45 years old. That's the typical time when people are having babies, when your sister's having a baby, your cousin, your best friend, your whatever. And you've been invited, you get an invitation, or so there's lots and lots of triggers that we as nurses need to be aware of. You know, all of a sudden, and so how does that manifest? Well, it could manifest in crying. It could manifest in being very agitated. Your patient could be withdrawn. They could be very angry. There's all kinds of ways that a patient can manifest. They may have trouble concentrating. Now, having said that, just because you have a patient who is very anxious and seems to have a lot going on, they wouldn't be in a hospital if they weren't sick with something. It might have something to do, perhaps, remember we said 1 in 4 women ages 15 to 45 have had an abortion. Maybe it has nothing to do with it. But you as the nurse, you need to just keep this in the back of your mind. I wonder if, and maybe you'll be able to better understand and better advocate for your patients if you approach the subject. Okay, grief and loss. There are different ways of grieving, and an abortion is a loss of a child. Pure and simple, a loss of a child. Now, oftentimes, the period right after you've had an abortion is a sense of relief. Oh, it's I don't have to worry about that now, and it's done, and and that's usually very, very short-lived. Denial can last anywhere from 7 to 15 years. 15 years. And I want to talk about that for just a minute. I know a woman who had an abortion when she was, I think she was about 22. I think she was a junior, senior in college. And she had an abortion. Never saw that father again. 2 years later, she met who is now her husband, and they've been married, I don't know, 25 years or so. She has yet to tell her husband, who she has already had 3 kids with, that she's actually been pregnant 4 times. Now, why? Why do you suppose? In her particular case, she was afraid her husband wouldn't love her. She was afraid that her family, her friends, anybody who found out would judge her, would not understand, would think badly of her. Because guess what? She was a Christian. Not only was she a Christian, she was a Catholic. Okay? So she still carries this with her in her head. No idea. And she didn't even tell anyone until 25 years after the fact. 25 years after the fact. Okay, so Kubler-Ross, probably something, probably you are familiar with Kubler-Ross. This is the stages of grief. So we have denial. We talked about that. Anger. Who could these women be angry with? Well, let's think about it. Maybe they're angry at God. Maybe they're angry with the Father. Maybe they're angry with society. Maybe they're angry with the abortionist. Who knows? Who knows? So then the next step that we have is bargaining. So what sometimes happens in bargaining is they want to make amends, And how do they make amends for this abortion that they had? Well, they might get pregnant again right away. They might think that they have to be supermom. They might go work for a church. They might think that they have to be, the perfect mother. Now, again, having said that, that does not mean that every person who works at the church has had an abortion. This does not mean that everyone who is trying to be a good mom, because most of us are, that they have had abortions. It is just sometimes we see this. Depression is the next one. Thoughts of suicide, very, very common. And then we finally get to acceptance. And in acceptance, forgiveness comes from God. Forgiveness comes from God. And that is something that we have to be sure that people understand. That you can have a wonderful, productive, full life, even if you've had abortions. Okay.
I was going to say where 11 11 minutes until 45. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Oh, okay,
Um,
okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have 11 minutes, and man, I've got a whole lot more to cover that you all will be able to look at in these notes. Teen abortion is very, very probably the most common. There are all sorts of risk factors for teens, psychological as well as physical. One thing that I do specifically want to talk about is, what if you changed your mind? What if you have taken the first PO med and you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot go through with this. I need to change. I've changed my mind. There is an organization, and it's abortionpillreversal.com. It's an organization of 2,500 physicians, Ob-Gyn physicians throughout the United States who will try to help you reverse this. The key is time. Within the first 24 hours, that's when the most success is. 64 to 68% success rate by this group of physicians. Then the next question I'm often asked is, if I do the reversal, is it going to hurt the baby? Studies have shown that no, it has not. There's more information that you'll be able to look at on their website. Also, in my notes, there is a story that was here in San Antonio from 2017, and it was a mother who actually gave birth at 27 weeks and 4 days. Okay, 27 weeks. You know, going back to your gestational, that's a tiny. This baby weighed 15 ounces. They didn't think that she was going to live. In fact, the doctors told her that the baby was not going to live. At the time of this article, that child was 3 years old and running around, and her mom had to chase her and could barely keep up. So viability. As we go on, viability becomes more and more successful for babies. I think that's a really cool real life story that happened right here in San Antonio. So one thing that I do like to give a disclosure that I work with an organization called Rachel's Journey. And what we do is we help post-abort anyone who's been touched by abortion. What does that mean? Who is that? People that have been touched by abortion is not just the mother. It could be the mother, it could be the father, it could be the grandparents, it could be the friend in college who drove her friend to the Planned Parenthood and now she feels guilty or partially responsible. Anyone who's touched by abortion could be anyone in society. We put on retreats, and anyone is invited to attend. Our retreats happen to be one day. There are some groups that have 3 full days. It is 100% confidential. And the difference in these women's and men's lives are truly remarkable. You can see the healing. You can see it in their face. You can see it in their body language, where they realize that they are loved. And that's what we as a society, that's what we in Rachel's Journey, that's what we as the church need to be sure that we have, that we include everyone, and that they know that they are forgiven. So, now I'm ready for questions. Do we have any questions tonight?
Let me see. That was a beautiful ending. I love the ending. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much.
For the first couple minutes, you're probably going to have to take any questions that come over Zoom because
Okay.
there is a delay on Facebook. But I'll let you know
Okay.
as soon as they come in.
Okay. Okay. Great. Great.
Yeah.
The only comment we have had, though, is from a Deb Kelsey Davis, and she said the psychological issues can linger for years, decades, and often a lifetime without healing support. So
Absolutely.
to know.
Absolutely. Absolutely true. And I can give different examples, and in fact, I'll share another story with you with one of the women that came to our retreat. She was going to have her abortion via PO med, and she decided she didn't want to be by herself. So she thought the very best thing to do was she took her first pill at Planned Parenthood, and then she invited her girlfriends, and they all went to the Renaissance Festival. So I don't know if y'all are familiar with Renfest, but it's a big dress up party kind of thing. And ordinarily it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of drinking. There's a lot of shows. There's it's a great time. But she took that second pill, and then she went to the bathroom because she was starting to have cramps, and she delivered her baby in a porta potty. This is her story, her words. And she held that baby in her hand. And she looked up at us and she said, I didn't know what to do with it. And these are the kinds of questions that Planned Parenthood doesn't answer. They don't tell her, what do you do? What do you do with the baby? You put in the toilet, you put in the trash, you put in a porta potty? Now, she did not tell us what she did with the baby. And it wasn't really our place to ask. But these are the kinds of things that, she'll never forget that. She will never, ever, ever forget that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so.
I had a question about Rachel's journey.
Yes.
I was just wondering, like, as a nurse, is that something that we could like refer our patients to, or is that like?
Absolutely.
I just wonder practically, how does that work?
I would say that is probably up to your facility, whether or not they will allow you to.
Mm-hmm.
However, you may come across someone, a friend or somebody at church or somebody you go to the movies with or whatever. And by all means, Rachel's Journey or Rachel's Vineyard is the other. We're kind of two branches, but we have the same goal. So absolutely. Thank you. That was a great question. Okay, the mother. Put my glasses on. Mother was forced to have an abortion. She was depressed and had no healing support. Then 2 years later, she had another child. Would the baby have complications? Every pregnant, okay, so potentially, we've talked about cervical incompetence, ectopic pregnancies. There's a whole host of other physical complications that may or may not occur. One story that I wanted to talk about with Planned Parenthood and the like is that in our state, they were saying that there is an abortion clinic, that there had to be a real hospital within, I don't remember, it's 30 minutes or 30 miles away. And the reason for that is in case she hemorrhages. This is a patient safety issue. I have seen in the operating room under non-stressful conditions where gynecologist was trying to dilate the cervix, and he uses, well, what they call dilators, and they're in graduated sizes so that he can open up, or she can open up the cervix to get into, the uterus itself. And he actually perfed that, preparated that uterus right then. Fortunately, we were in a hospital, and we stopped the surgery right away because of the threat of hemorrhage. And she went upstairs, and she, ended up spending the night, and thankfully, everything was fine. But you don't know that. And that is why the goal was not to be restrictive to women. Oh, you can't have them. No, the purpose of it was to protect women just in case something went wrong. And so I am a big proponent of, if you're going to be having surgery like this somewhere, you need to have a hospital nearby, and that doctor should have privileges there. Seems pretty simple to me, the patient safety issue.
Well, here in New Mexico, we have the case of Keisha Atkins. I don't know if you heard, a few years ago, and she was 24 weeks, and she came over here to our late-term abortion clinic from like Texas or somewhere. And yeah, she hemorrhaged out on the operating table or the table there, and she died. She was really young too. And that was just a few years ago.
And it's absolutely tragic because it didn't have to happen in the first place. And so many times, I'd have to look it up. I think the stat was 79% of women said that they weren't given the proper information to make an informed decision. We're asking these women, they are asking these women to sign a consent. Okay, well, nurses, we know that this is an informed consent where we have to talk about the risks and the benefits. Is that happening? Well, 79% of the women who, had abortions said they were not given the information. That is huge. 79%. Nurses, we need to do better. We need to do better. Okay. Anything else?
Okay, see. Does anyone have any more questions? Here. Let's see. Got my phone going off here. Let's see. Okay. Sorry, it keeps muting me.
Okay, so normally when I do this lecture to nursing students, I know from being a nurse for a very long time, nurses like to eat. And so normally this is much more of a discussion than it is an actual lecture like we did tonight. And so had you asked me really good questions, or if I had gotten really great answers, you would have gotten chocolate candy. So unfortunately, couldn't do that tonight. But next time, if we're all in the same room together, and hopefully that will be very soon, we'll do that instead. So thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for your attention and coming by. Nurses, always remember, you are the advocate for your patients, and you have to follow what your conscience is. Protect yourself, protect your license, and good luck. Good luck, and God bless to all of you.
Thank you so much, Miss thank you so much, Miss Katherine.
Thank you.
Totally got to figure out how to send chocolate over Zoom one day. That would be
Yeah, exactly. If we could figure that out, that would have been great.
an invention worth making. Oh, one day. Thank you, and I'm gonna share this, especially with other nursing people, and because everyone needs to hear the words you had to say to us. It's
right, and
really
if
inspiring.
you end up having more questions, I'll be happy to do that.
Yes, if anyone has any more questions, just let Students for Life know here, and we can always email Ms. Katherine with more.
That would be great. That
Okay.
would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right, you too.
Thank
Good
you for
night.
everyone attending.